So this talk is a bit about accessibility and how I fixed my personal website. It also has some personal content, so I hope you enjoy it at least and learn something in the end. Hello, as I just said. And as Paula said, I work at Dashlane. I joined 5 months ago, and I'm a front-end engineer there, software engineer, so I also do some back-end, but at Dashlane I'm doing mainly front-end. And my interests in the web range from web protocols and web security to this thing called accessibility that we are going to talk today. And as also a fun fact, another one, I used to organize the JavaScript meetup, and I live in Lisbon, so if you ever come to Lisbon and want to give a talk, you can also ping me for that. And yeah, let's start to talk a bit about LI and accessibility, which is, so LI is an abbreviation for accessibility. And this is usually not an easy topic to talk in companies because most people don't test for LI. Most people think everything is there for granted and everyone can access this, the stuff that we put on the web. But that's not true for some cases, and we need to test and try to improve the web we are creating. And especially in this COVID situation that we are facing right now, we want the web to be more accessible than ever to everyone. And the conclusions I have to take from this are basically that developers in general, we need to learn more. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to try to create a better web. And some numbers about this. So the estimated number of people that is visually impaired in the world is about 285 million. So it's a bunch of people that might not be able to visit our websites and navigate through them. It's not only visually impaired people, so someone that has low vision or it's blind, but accessibility also means and also represents people with some other disabilities, such as motor or cognitive disabilities. And we need to think and try to address those use cases to try to create the experience as much as possible near to the experience that everyone else has. So what it represents in general is actually a bunch of people. So if you want to create a more inclusive web, we really need to act. And the simplest example that I can find is like if we have a newspaper and someone is accessing our newspaper website, and what would you do? You probably are going to select the headings of and the titles of the articles that you think are interesting, and you probably are going to save them for later or open them in a new tab. So for someone that is using a screen reader, it's probably something similar that they are going to try to do. And there's a lot of stuff that we can try to do to help the web to be a better place, let's say. And it starts from the coders. So the main things that I want to address with this talk is for us to be a bit more assertive when doing our codes, and also when reviewing other people's PRs. And there are a lot of common problems usually, but these things like contrasts, like the ability to zoom, and also the possibility to add the right HTML elements to our page are one of the most important things that we can do. So why this is actually important to me, why it's something that it's relevant for me, and why someone that likes web security is also interested in accessibility. The main reason is that I have a friend that is 100% blind, and this guy tries to access the web every day, and almost every day he finds a new filer. And sometimes he reports to me and we discuss. I do volunteer with him. To give some context, is a 70-year-old man, so it's a friend of ours, of my family, that we do some volunteer for the last 3 years. And every time I talk with him, I feel that I still have something new to learn and to understand about the web and about our teams and the codes that we do every day. So this case that I'm going to present is actually my personal website. So it's this website that you can see here. It's something really simple. It has a section with the some talks I gave in the past. It also has some blog posts that we can open, for instance, this one, which is related to the talk. As a section about me, and some photographies because I like photography. This website, by looking at it and the time I had to do it, which was more or less 1 week and a half, I did it between jobs around the end of January this year. Basically, I didn't have that much time, but I tried to use like the basic HTML elements, use the alternative attributes for images, for instance. So I actually had a great expectation before starting the assessment that I just did. I thought it was readable. I thought that the landmarks were in place, like the header, the footer, the main, the navigation was there. And that I was not failing that much at this. As I just said, that images were accessible for everyone, especially in the blog posts. But the reality is a bit different. And I found out that there's always something that we can improve. I think it was interesting and gave me some stuff to think about and to share also with my team and some friends. And that's why I'm sharing with you too. So what I use to actually do the assessment is something pretty basic. So if you have a Mac, you have VoiceOver already installed. If you don't have a Mac, you can use other screen readers. So VoiceOver is a screen reader for macOS. You can turn it on just by using Command F5. But there are others for other platforms, like for Linux you have Chromevox, and for Windows you can use JAWS. But there are many others that you can use. So I use that to be used as a screen reader, so it would read everything I have on the web page. Also, I use this plugin called Totali that I will show you in a minute, and No Coffee. So Totali actually allows you to access your website. So you can see my screen, I believe. You can evaluate it for headings to check if the headings are okay on the page. So in this case, the headings seem fine. You can check for contrast, for labels, alternative text in images, and so on and so forth. So this version that I'm running on localhost that you can see here is the version of the website before I did the assessment. And the other one that I have here is the one that is in production right now. So in Serikai.me. So if I go back to this one, and if I restart, you can see if I go back and forth on the same page, that you can already see that there are some differences between the titles. For instance, I changed the colors here, I changed the colors under my name, I also changed the colors in the event name and the dates. So if I show you how it was before, I had like this vision here with a lot of red contrast issues. Not that much because they are almost 4 values, but well, it's not okay. So I decided to fix it and increase the contrast, and actually right now it looks like this, so it's much cleaner, let's say. There's also many others that you can explore. Another thing that I use that was really powerful to understand some disabilities, let me just reset this one, was this other extension called No Coffee Vision Simulator. So it allows you, for instance, to try to see the website as someone that cannot see very well, so it will see the website a bit blurry. And it also allows you, for instance, to test for some sight diseases, like seeing no color at all, or denotropia, for instance. So let me go back to it. It's pretty interesting because you can understand people that can only see, for instance, blue, or they can see they cannot see green, for instance. It's worth to test. So this was what I used, and let's talk. I already talked a bit about the findings, but let's talk a bit deeper on that. So I had these contrast issues here. So one of those that I just showed to you, and actually I believe I can skip this one also. It was the back and forth of the changes over the website. And there's another one that I would like to show, which is pretty interesting. So I really enjoyed to do this fancy title thing, which is these titles that I have here, where you can see that 3 or more letters are in a different color. And that seems interesting. I was just matching what I have on my CV. But for a screen reader, when I tested this with a screen reader, actually it was reading it as 2 different words instead of just one. So it was reading articles instead of articles, which can really break the experience for someone using a screen reader only. If you look at the code I have here, so the fix actually was just having this ARIA label with the title that came from the properties that I have here. This is a basic React component. The only thing that it does is to get the tokens from 0 to the letters that I receive in the properties, which default to 3 if nothing is received. And then after that, I just render it, and it's a span just to give the color. So nothing special, let's say, but it was breaking, and I was not expecting that. So we should really test for this kind of stuff, at least the minimum experience, let's say. You cannot, it's important to mention that you cannot, like, in order to have everything having the maximum accessibility possible, I don't even think that might be 100% possible. It's difficult because it might not be accessible for someone. It's difficult. But in order to have everything, you need to make the website accessible in a way that everyone can access. You really need to have a dedicated team. But, and sometimes that's enforced by law, but for the minimum amount of specs, like guaranteeing that someone can get the minimum experience and understand what's going on, it's quite simple to actually doing that, and doing code reviews also help to check your peers' code. Let's talk about icons. So icons are really nice. They usually help the user experience. You can do a lot with them. And you probably saw that I'm using some icons, I believe, in this talks section. I was just playing around, and the whole idea was to highlight some talks for some reason, or even some blog posts that I think are more interesting, or that I want to highlight in some way. But what actually happens is that I have some experience that are not the ones that I was expecting. So in this case, I have, for instance, this case here, which is of a talk I gave, a podcast about offline first. And it's interesting. Let me see if you can hear this, how a screen reader is going to read this.
Keyword, headphones, podcast, offline first is a social movement at offline camp conference, Berlin, Germany, unselected.
So if you manage to hear, it says headphones podcast. And that's a bit weird to hear. And it might not say anything to someone that is using a screen reader. So actually, in order to fix this one, I had 2 different options. The first one was to make the icons completely invisible, so they were not read at all. and the other one was to actually give some meaning to the icons. So the first one, it's really simple. It just use these attributes under the elements, the area hidden true, and it's not going to be red. Actually, this was a really easy fix, and it is also the fix that I selected in the end. So basically, I have the span where the icons are going to be rendered here, and I basically added that here in the codes, and that works as expected, and the icon is not going to be red. But I also wanted to understand how could I actually add that add a label to the icons. So imagine that I want the star icon to be read as highlight post. And I thought, okay, let's try to use the ARIA label for that. I tried that approach with the screen reader. It was not working. I was like, okay, what is happening here? Why this is not listening with the screen reader? So I tried different approaches. I started to try to hack it. So I actually created. I had an area label by instead of the area label, and I created another span which was only visible for someone using a screen reader. So for any other people, it was using a display none, so not being seen at all. And I had an ID to link to the area label by. So what I was expecting with this example was actually that it was going to read, please read this, when the icon was there, instead of saying headphones or not saying anything at all if I used ARIA hidden. But that didn't work at all. So I had to actually take a look at the documentation to try to understand what's going on and how to fix this, because, well, look at over the web. And I ended up seeing the documentation from w3.org, which is actually the documentation that everyone should also read. And it explicitly says that not to use ARIA label or ARIA labeled by on a span or a div unless there is a given role. So in my case, I didn't have any role. This was actually not a custom element. It was like a span that I had there, nothing minimal. So that was the issue. I also would like to point out that despite the fact that this case didn't work for VoiceOver, there are some examples with different screen readers where this can actually be read. So the point that I want to make out here is that we need to actually look into different screen readers if we want to maximize the experience, because sometimes it can be read by a screen reader but not read by another one. So we need to be really careful on that. Another thing, completely different thing that I'd like to talk about is landmarks. So landmarks allow to increase the experience for someone that is visiting the website. You probably have seen, let me show a quick example. If you go to gov.uk, they have a whole team on accessibility. And if you open their website and if you press tab to try to use the keyboard, you see that they show this skip to main content button here, which is hidden for everyone. But if someone is using a screen reader, it's going to pop up, and actually it's going to the main element of the page, and that's some hints that are really important for someone using a screen reader. So this slide is about a talk that I actually gave some years ago at a Coder Dojo event. A Coder Dojo is basically an event to help kids to learn how to program, and I used to be a mentor there for some time. And basically here I was trying to explain them that inside the body of the page you can have a header, a main, a footer, also a navigation if you're looking at the top navigation in the header. And there are many other elements on a page that you can use that are already there by default. So we really need to use those hints and help the screen readers as much as possible, because they already know what this is. When I looked at my website, I actually found that I had, again, some mistakes. So while I was refactoring some code and moving stuff around, and it's so simple to do this with React, because you have multiple components, and you can really easily not break things, but in this case, I actually break things. I broke some things. So I was doing a refactor, I moved some stuff around, and I ended up not having the name wrapping the parent div that we have here. So actually, the div right now has an h2 and the main inside it. So the fix for this was actually just to move the main out of the div. So something really, really simple. But imagine that I had that jump to main that I just showed you from gov.uk on my website, and that's maybe something I can add. That wouldn't read the article thing. That would jump directly to the talks or to the blog posts, which can break the experience, right? Another really important thing, and that we already talked a bit about, are the HTML elements. Also the ones we just talked before, but there's more. There are headings that we've seen with the TotalI extension, for instance. So we have these headings on the website, and I actually broke something here too. So I had basically. I actually have an H2 for articles, but for the purpose of this example, I'm using H2. But basically, the H1 for I'm using H1. I mean, I have an H1 for articles. I have H2 for the title of the blog post or the talk, and I did a mistake while adding H3 to the date, because the date is not a heading; it's just a date. It could be a paragraph or even a span. It depends on the purpose. But it's for sure not a heading. And I used that, I remember, because I was lazy and I wanted to have the styles done. So basically the fix was just moving it to be a paragraph and adapting the styles. It's something really simple, but well, it is breakable, let's say. What's to fix next? So I have a working website for some time. Now it's much more accessible, let's say, but there's still some stuff to be fixed. And one of those is quite important, actually. I have code snippets in almost all blog posts. And the code snippets that I have insufficient contrast. So actually, I took a while to find a theme for code snippets that I actually like, and that was fitting quite nice with the rest of the website. But what happened was that I searched for a theme, I found one eventually, and when I tested this, I was like, oh, okay, everything is broken with the contrast here. I can quickly show you. Let me pick, let's say this one, and this is, yeah, if you see, everything is broken here. So I really need to pick another one or change this one, or at least remove the background, or do something, maybe adapt it, because I really like the colors. And also the images in the photography session. Again, I was a bit lazy. I basically added the alt attribute on the images in the photography section to be the name of the picture, instead of having a proper name or title for it. While on the articles, I remember to be really, really careful. I did a really nice description, sometimes a huge description for the images in the articles, in the blog post. Here I was just, okay, I want to do this. I'm using Gatsby images, the model from Gatsby, because the website is using Gatsby behind the scenes. And this is so cool. They are doing, they do lazy loading to actually load all the images. This is pretty nice. But I didn't care that much about adding an alternative attribute here. Yes, I think I talked about most of the things that I fixed on the website. There's still much more that I didn't have the time to add in this presentation, because there's something that I believe it's really, really important to fix, and that we have many websites that try to fix it, but don't have the completely experience fixed. So I have a demo about this. Let me just pick some water while you look into the demo. So imagine that I want to add a newsletter for my website. So imagine that I just want the email because, yeah, this is just a simple example. And we have many forms out there over the web. And basically, I have several types of forms here in the top navigation, as you can see. And there's only an input field in this case. I could have the name also and more details. But imagine that I just want the email, and I have a subscribe button for someone, and that subscribe is going to actually add the person to my list in the backend. Doesn't matter that much right now. What matters here is to understand the experience that is being done. So we have a form, we have one input element, and we have a button. That's it. So now I'm going to show the code. Don't be scared about it. It's really, really simple. So from line 13 to 24, I have the form that was just explaining. It has a paragraph saying enter your email. It has the input to set the email, and it has another input with the type submits, which is the button that we are using. And for someone that already know a bit or are interested in this kind of interesting things, and how input fields are going to be actually be read and how elements relate to each other, you probably know that these paragraphs that we have on line 14 actually should be a label. And in this case, it's a paragraph. So this is, for instance, one of the things that is not correct. But the most impressive thing, from a bad way, let's say, is that the experience is going to be broken for someone that is using a screen reader and jumps directly to the input field. So actually, if I use VoiceOver, the output that I'm going to get is something like this. If I'm on this input field, required invalid data, edit text. So I have no context on what is this. Is this an email? Is this a password? What I'm adding here? Do you want my name? So the experience here is going to be really, really bad because we don't have the label assigned with the inputs. And fortunately, we are staying with the validations from the browser. So because this was a required field here on line 20, you can see, it actually gives me this message, please fill these fields. Or if I try to add this, it says, oh, please include @ because this is an email address. Okay, that's already something, but there's a lot of times where we actually add an attribute to the forms to hide the validation from the browser. And that attribute is this one on line 13, the no validate attribute true. So actually, this is going to say, I don't want the validations from the browser. And what's going to happen is that the person can keep clicking on the subscribe button and nothing is going to happen. I don't get any feedback. But however, something that is correct here is that right now I don't have a paragraph on line 14, but I have a label. So actually, the label has an HTML4, which is the 4 for for the inputs with the input ID that we have on line 18. And with simple HTML, it's going to be only 4. But for React, you need to write it as HTML4, pretty much what we do for class name versus class in pure vanilla HTML. So actually, in this case, I don't get any feedback, but at least when I see with VoiceOver, I get the message. So you can see it's pretty different from the one we had before. If I'm on this field, it's going to read enter your email, required invalid data, edit text. Whereas in the other one, it was reading required invalid data, edit text. So it's the experience, it's much better, let's say. But it still has some failures because I cannot click this button, I don't get anything. So we actually have errors that we want to show, and most of the times we actually want to show errors and to place them correctly on our page. So I have another example with the error handling form. And in this case, I basically have a div here on line 29, which has a class name error, and it is supposed to show the error if there is any error. And basically what's going on here is that I'm always showing the error when the person submits. You can see on line 12. So basically when the form is submitted, I'm going to set the error using React to be the email is invalid, please fix it. And let me try this. So the email is invalid, please fix it. So the error message actually shows up, which is nice. But if you look at this with the voiceover, the only thing you're going to get is actually what you get before with the basic form. So for someone using a screen reader, they don't get anything when they are doing this. So they don't know that the email was invalid or something was going on. And the way to fix this is not that difficult, but there's a lot of websites where this experience is actually broken. So if we have to think, what should we do? Basically, we should show the error and read the error every time someone is on the field, or if someone pressed the subscribe button, right? Because we want to actually say what was breaking for the form not to be submitted. We need to give some context. So actually in the last one, I'm fixing this. And the experience is much more interesting. Actually, VoiceOver is going to show two different messages. The first one is enter your email, required invalid data, edit text. And the second one is the email is invalid, please fix it. You are currently on a text field. So if you are on the field, if you click on the subscribe button, it's similar, but the first message is going to say subscribe. And if I show you the code, the difference is minimal. It's basically having these attributes here on line 21 and also on line 34, the area described by, and add the ID of the div of the error, which is described on line 29. So this ID here, and there's a tiny detail that the div has to exist actually before the component is rendered. So imagine if this div is inside line 13, so you actually had the condition, the ternary before, that might break in some for some screen readers. So the div has to exist when the component is rendered. That's a tiny detail, but I believe that at least on VoiceOver it works both ways. That I tried at least. So I'm just going to show you really quick if I manage to turn on VoiceOver. VoiceOver can be really slow if you...
Now in present, how I fixed accessibility application, current. Heading level, now in present, now in React app, Google Chrome incognito window. And one more, enter your email. Error handling form, ARIA, button list 4 items. Okay. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space.
Okay, now that it stopped, I can continue. So the thing that we want to test is actually, for instance, if I try to add
enter your email. Required invalid data, edit text, main. So you are currently on a text field. Yeah. To enter text in this field, type.
Okay, so imagine that I will add something like
Daniela. You are N-A. You are currently on a text field. To enter text in this field, type.
It can be really boring to have VoiceOver behind the scenes while you're coding, or even when you open DevTools, because it can really mess everything and try to read everything everywhere, which it can be really confusing. And that's why I decided to add these two buttons to show you this. So imagine that now
subscribe
I'm going to select.
You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space.
So I'm trying to click the button.
Daniela, insertion, subscribe button. Email is invalid. Please fix it. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control Option Space.
Okay.
Voiceover off.
That's basically it. So as you may have seen, I hope, basically when I press subscribe, actually it's going to say subscribe button, and then it's going to say what is invalid, why this cannot be fixed. And also, if I go back to the element, you're going to see these two messages, like enter your email regarding invalid data, and then the error message, please fix it. The email is invalid, which is much more meaningful for someone using a screen reader, let's say. They don't have to guess what's going on. So we are almost in the end of the presentation. So to sum up, 2 things that you can start to do today and are really important and are quick wins to actually fix most accessibility issues are actually taking into account contrasts. So talk with the designers of your team and try to actually enforce accessibility. It's really important for visually impaired people. And also there's another one that I didn't have that problem on my website, but it's really, really important. And that friend that I have is always reporting. Another friend that I have is always reporting. Is the ability to zoom. So basically for someone that cannot see very well, let's say also my mother, for instance, it's really difficult to zoom in over a website. There are some rules that we sometimes add in the meta tags, in the head of the website to actually prevent people from zooming. And this can really break the experience for some users. So there's also something we should take into account, the ability to zoom. And another one that is important and that I talked a lot about that was the HTML elements. So try to use the right HTML elements, try to use the tags that already exist. For instance, don't try to create a button from a div or from a span that also have on-click events. Try to use the button element, because otherwise a screen reader cannot guess that that's a button. And it might not be accessible by a keyboard. And there's a lot of people that just use keyboard. They don't need to be visually impaired or completely blind to use the keyboard. And that's pretty much what I wanted to talk. I would like to end that. Sometimes we had a lot of design clues to people, but we sometimes create, with these clues, we sometimes create a lot of trouble for some other users. So we really need to take that into account. And I believe that by being more skeptical with our own code and also by reviewing other people's code, we can help to create a better web and mainly to fix the UX and the whole experience for most of our users, let's say. And that's pretty much I wanted to talk with you. Thank you very much for listening. Back to Paola, I guess, for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I loved it yesterday, and I loved it even more today. I think it's very important, as you mentioned at the beginning, you paid attention in the first, from the first time you made your website, and still you had mistakes and still you had issues from an accessibility standpoint. So imagine for all those developers that don't pay attention from the start. So we are waiting for questions. If you have any questions, as you can see, we have App Slido. Okay, there is a thank you, not a question, but a thank you. So from a junior dev and never used accessibility tools before, I will pay more attention on it from now. So you got one onboarded. Waiting for a couple of minutes for questions.
Just let me add something that I didn't mention is that for most IDEs, let's say Visual Studio or Atom or anything else you use, there's linters that you can add. There are plugins that you can add to actually help you. I have more details about that on the blog post, so you can also check that out. But for most of them, you can see that you can have really hints on the code saying, oh, you are missing a label on this element, for instance.
Okay, yeah, we will share also your blog post on our Slack. Okay. And there is a question: did you notice any SEO improvement after working on your website?
SEO. Actually, the SEO was pretty good already because I'm using Gatsby and it does a lot of work behind the scenes. But I didn't saw a huge improvement, let's say, but probably I have that also because it also looks into the tags that you are using, for instance, how you use main, footer, header, and so on. I also fixed, for instance, I added the articles on the articles. There's an HTML tag for that. There's also a section, for instance, and all that stuff can help to improve your SEO. Also, obviously, using the right headings, but the headings were almost okay, despite the dates, let's say. Thank you. Okay, there are more. Thank you. And for having me. Okay. And inviting me too. Yeah. So I think we are good. Okay. If anyone has a question, please feel free to ask. Yeah, you can use any of the platforms, or it's easier to also find my email on the website or somewhere. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.